Hi, this is Glenn Livingston, and I'm here with Sunny Hills. Hi, Sunny.
Hi, Glenn.
Sunny has quite an interesting background as a life coach and an entrepreneur and a positive thinker. Sunny has graciously consented to let me interview him today so that you as a listener may have the opportunity to learn from his experience and understand what resource he has to offer. With that, Sunny, I thought that we might start by talking about when you first got involved with life coaching.
What would you like to know?
Well, how long have you been involved with life coaching?
I first heard of the term I think I heard of it on the internet sometime in the 90s, but I first really heard about it in the fall of 2000. When my wife had gone up camping with a friend, and she came back and said, you ought to talk to Deb about this thing called life coaching. It's her career, and I think you might really like it. I did talk with Deb, and she introduced me to the book Coactive Coaching. And
is Deb one of the authors of Coactive Coaching?
She's one of the authors of Therapist as Life Coach.
Oh, I see, yes, with Patrick Williams.
Right. So she had a therapy practice. She told me the story how she had a therapy practice, doing clinical work. She taught at the university. And what was happening was that because of insurance issues, she had to diagnose people with an illness in order to treat them or work with them. And she didn't like that because she wanted to work with people without having to put them in some category of being ill. And with life coaching, you're actually working with healthy people who simply want to enrich their lives. And she liked that a lot better, so she started experimenting with it, and she converted her whole practice to that, and then she wrote that book with Pat Williams. And I had been thinking of, after I retired and moved here to Maui in 1999, I was spending a year just kicking around on the beach and working part-time on a radio station here locally, having fun. And I had thought of going into business consulting, but as I was on my way over here, my wife and I visited a friend who had a business that was similar to ours in the audio-video retail area. And in talking with him, I realized that if I was a consultant, I would actually be taking on his problems as my own, and I'd be really powerless to implement strategies, but I'd have all the burden of the responsibility of the problems. So I ditched the idea of becoming a consultant, but as I talked with Deb and read this book about coactive coaching, I realized that this was very different. Here, the client's responsible, and the client finds the solutions, and I'm simply a catalyst.
And so that appealed to you?
Yeah, because I could use my experience to ask questions rather than to provide answers.
Gotcha. I just wanted to touch on something that you said because I thought it was very important, that the catalyst which brought your friend out of the psychotherapy world and into the life coaching world was her concern with having to force a diagnosis, force a person into the mold of a mental disorder in order to get reimbursement from the insurance companies? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
Right.
Okay.
That the pretext of going forward with any client was always that they were a broken person, that they had problems, they had to be fixed. She felt some of the people she came across were not broken, but in order to get paid, she had to say they were.
Okay. And so in coactive coaching, you work with whole people.
Yeah, the assumption is that the person is resourceful, creative, and whole. The pillars of it.
Mm-hmm. Did you take action on that once you became aware of coactive coaching and that paradigm? How did you get more involved?
Well, I read that book, and I'm a real self-starter type person, and I've been an incredibly successful student in life. So I read the book and decided I could at least practice and apply these principles since no license was required to practice. And I called up some business friends, colleagues that I had known in Oregon when I was in business. I told them of my interest in this new field and told them that I would essentially do this form of consulting, which was not consulting, and I would do it for no charge. Would they be interested? And a few of them had said yes. So I pretty much dabbled in it with a book knowledge, which I admit now, and I see now, is very limited. I wanted to find out whether I would even be interested in this field, whether I would even like it. I didn't want to move forward with paying for a certification or committing to it without having some feel for whether I really liked it. I wasn't about to do something I didn't like, not when I'm retired and living on Maui.
And you've got a well singing in your backyard, right?
Yep, and right outside my door, there's a cruise ship there right now.
Yeah. I'd like not to gloss over so much the way that you initiated yourself into the field, because I think that's an important scenario that you just outlined and something that other potential coaching wannabes, coaching newbies can possibly emulate. So I'm wondering two things. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about specifically who you approached and how you approached them, and more specifically what you said. And secondarily,
maybe it might be how I proceeded to coach, what guidelines I used.
Yes, there was that, and also how you might do it differently if you had it to do over again.
Okay. How I did it was, for instance, I called an entrepreneur. He was a State Farm insurance agent, and he was going through some transition where State Farm was displacing him, and he had actually had a possible lawsuit against them, and he was now going to manage a local insurance agent office in another town. And so he was going through some transition. I knew that, and I simply said that, the format would be that we'd have weekly calls, and I'd ask him some powerful, thought-provoking questions, and we'd come away with either an inquiry, something for him to think about and ponder from different perspectives, or with an action step that he would agree to, and then the following week we'd check in and see where he was and do the same kind of thing from there. He said, sure, you're welcome.
So did anybody say no?
Yeah. I also asked just someone here on Maui. She said no. However, it's funny because about a year later, she hired me, and she became my only client on Maui. All my clients have been in remote areas, different countries or different states.
By telephone.
So it was funny. She said no, but a year later, she called me up and said, are you still doing that?
Interesting. So how many people did you call altogether?
At the very first, probably it's been a long time. I'm guessing 5 or 6. Another one I ended up doing this kind of thing with was someone who I had met on Maui in that first year I was here, and he was working in a restaurant, and he served this lady who turned out to be a Rae-Dawn Chong. She's an actress who's daughter of Tommy Chong.
Oh, sure, I know who she is.
She's a great actress. She was directing her first movie, and she was so impressed with him, she cast him right there in the lead role and flew him to L.A. the next day, got him an agent and manager, and took him under her wing, and he got cast in that movie and then another movie, and he did a few TV things, and now he's in his 3rd year in a show, starring role on the WB network. He's done several movies since, and
wow.
It turned out that when he was there auditioning, I went ahead and called him up and coached him for a while, too, as he was in the audition process, just to keep his momentum going and break into that industry. I also worked with people who were in MLM. I had a cousin who was in MLM and coached her for some time. So kind of a diverse. I didn't have any particular niche I was working with. They were just friends or family.
Friends and family and former business associates.
Mm-hmm.
You gave them all what the structure would be, and you told them there'd be no charge.
Yeah, and I told them I was doing it to see if I liked it. So it was kind of selfishly motivated, but they could benefit.
How long did that go on for?
I started that in October of 2000, and I believe it was in April of 2001 that I decided to go get certified, or to start taking some of the precursors to the certification. And coactive coaching seemed to me to be the only one I would want to do. If there wasn't coactive coaching, I wouldn't have become a coach. Coactive coaching, the client is the know-it-all, and I like that.
Got it.
It matches up with my training in college. I studied Greeks. I read Plato in the original Greek. And so Socrates is always a hero of mine, and he was wise because he asked questions, not because he told people things.
Love it.
And this was like a rebirth of the Socratic method in the 20th century, almost spontaneous rebirth of a philosophy.
Well, you and I probably have more to talk about because I'm a fan of the Greeks as well. I'm sure you're much more literate about them, but I'll leave that for an offline conversation. You said that you did this trial period to see if you liked it. What that led you to was coactive coaching, but I want to still back up and go a little bit more through the trial period, because a lot of the people listening to this are really people that might be thinking about getting into it and not sure if they like it, just like you were at that time, and I wonder what you liked about it.
I liked the idea that it was a discovery process, and again, like the Socratic method, what Socrates called himself was a midwife, that he was a midwife of ideas. He asked questions and helped people give birth to the truth, to their truth. And that's what this is like. And it just seems that it was a way for me to give back. I had been taken under the wing of different mentors. There was an old man in the 1980s who was past international director of Toastmasters, and I had very poor self-esteem, and I had called up this number in the paper about Toastmasters, and I just happened to talk with him, and he asked me about my life a little bit, and it ended up he was the first one who told me that I was a valuable person, that I had something to give to the world, and he made me believe in myself. He helped me develop my self-esteem, and he did it all of the kindness of his heart, kind of like an older brother or a father that I never had. And I always thought, someday when I'm 74, I'm going to help some young person just like Don helped me.
That's wonderful.
So as I was doing this coaching, I was like, I can do this now, and it doesn't have to be with just one person.
And you don't have to wait till you're 74.
Right.
Yeah. I think that in the coaches and even the psychotherapists that I've talked to, there's always a story like that about someone who really mentored them and made a tremendous difference in the path that they chose in life and the way that their self-confidence developed. And I think it's very valuable for people to take a moment and reflect upon who that is and what specifically they got from that person. And that really provides a inspiration and motivation to move forward in the coaching industry.
Yeah, and all my other work I had been providing services, for money, filling needs for people with regard to sound and video equipment, or installing it, or designing a recording studio for them. And I was always giving something to help them out for pay. But it seems like this was so much more targeted toward the person's heart and mind and who they are, turning them into a contributor or helping them become more of a contributor. So it just seemed like it was more central to me and who I am and to them and who they were than selling sound and video equipment.
Sure.
Meaningful, satisfying.
Was there anything that surprised you as you got more involved with coaching as compared to what you expected it to be?
I was surprised how much I grew as a person. I had been through some pretty big transitions. I'd read a lot of psychology, read William James and Freud and all the classical psychology, Carl Jung, and I read all the self-help books, and I had done a lot of self-development over the years, and I was really surprised at how much more there was for me. The first kind of coaching is fulfillment coaching, and it's all about helping people identify their personal values that are unique to them with their own language, not values in the sense of morals, but values such as, one of my highest values is freedom. I value my free time. I value freedom to do what I want when I want to. Some people have a high value toward integrity. You've told me about that with you. So we all have our different values, and so there's a discovery of values, do some future self exercises where you do a visualization, go up into the outer space, and then come back down to Earth 20 years in the future and meet your future self, who introduces themselves to you and tells you their name, and you sit down and talk about how they got there and what they've learned, and you come back and so you've met your future self, and to help you think about who you are and how you want that to unfold so that you have something to work on with regard to your personal fulfillment.
Gotcha.
The second kind of coaching is balance coaching. The idea is that it's all about perspectives, that we in life, that the client is going to believe or they feel that wherever they are, however they look at things, that perspective they're in is real. And that we as coaches know they can describe that perspective, they can tell you what their reality is, and then you can invite them to physically move out of that and look at it and now get into another physical position perhaps, body geography, and now say, what's this perspective? And name it. And now, this place where they were stuck, what do they see from here? And that you can invite them to take 4 or 5 or 6 perspectives in a period of 45 minutes and have them actually now look at 4 or 5 they created and named and choose one. Which one's most attractive to them? So they recognize that they're not stuck, that you might have a working mother who believes she's too old to go back to work. That's a perspective. What's another perspective? Well, she's got experience. She has experience she's bringing to a job that others don't have. So that's the experience perspective, and you can ask her to tell about that. And anyway, the idea is that you don't buy into the client's one perspective they have on every situation. It's your job to see other possibilities and invite them to stand in them. So that's called balance coaching. Well, it had an impact on me as a person to not feel so stuck. Even though I'm retired, debt-free, living the life of my dreams in Maui, I still would find myself feeling stuck or feeling like there was one perspective on things. I came to realize that there's more than one perspective, always. And it just gave me more freedom and choice, which I really value.
Well, I totally agree with that.
And then the third kind of coaching is called process coaching. And this one didn't agree with me very much. And the idea is that if you take a client there and you let them look whatever they're afraid of in the face, that suddenly it's not so fearful anymore. And if you take them down the tube or down this into their emotion and let them be there and be with them there and just let them experience it, that they will of their own accord come out when they're ready.
When you give the ghost a name, it ceases to be a ghost.
Yes. And so if it's their personality is this mansion with many rooms, and there's a room that they don't want to go in, maybe you can just lead them to put their hand on the door. And maybe next time they can crack it open. And maybe next time they can peek in, you know.
But you said that didn't agree with you.
Well, not with me, because it just happens to be my life history. I think you know I was hit by a car when I was 12 and almost killed and scarred my legs and kind of socially outcast. And during my teen years, I went from being a golden boy who everybody loved to being a freak and an outcast. And
how old were you?
I was 12. And so as a result, well, you could say I spent the next 18 to 20 years. I went into the dark side really deeply. I read Dostoevsky, was a teenager, absorbed with pain and suffering, and it's like I lived there. And I've been through all that, and I've come out the other side, and now I'm sunny. And personally, I don't think the dark side has much to offer. I'm choosing other things. So for me, it was kind of like,
Which kind of leads me to the goals and pursuits that you have now, because in addition to doing one-to-one coaching, you've also got another way that you're touching people's lives, don't you?
Yeah. I've used the positive thinking and affirmations and visualization since the 80s. And having been an audio producer before I went into my own business, I've been a radio personality and a professional audio producer. I just always have I've always had this idea of creating affirmation CDs. And just like everybody has some inner dream that seems so big, you're scared to do it. For a long time, I was afraid to do it. But just the last year or so, I've been creating CDs. And just since June 23rd, I now have nearly 4,000 people in 52 countries who are receiving my affirmations by email, many of whom have bought my CDs, and kind of building up a network of positive thinking.
You can get those affirmations for free by email, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
At sunnythoughts.com, is that right?
Right, SUNNYTHOUGHTS.com.
Sure. Yes, and I'm an avid user of the Achievement and Wealth CDs that you make, which are just wonderful. Yeah. I'm a debt-free multimillionaire, and I'm going to stay that way for the rest of my life.
That's right.
Which is very silly the first time you hear it, but then you listen to it, and it has an impact on your thinking.
I think it's natural that the first time people hear them, they're pretty big thoughts, and the first time people hear them, the analytical mind goes, crazy, that's nuts, what a wacky thought that is. But after a while, your inner supportive voice gets activated, and then suddenly people are telling me they just turn on the CD, and all they have to do is hear the tone of my voice, and it's a catalyst, and they're thinking about their big dreams, and they're making plans, and they're moving forward. So
there you go. And it's wonderful to be able to touch lives on that level.
Yeah, and it's exciting. And without the coaching, I guarantee you, without the coach training, without doing the coaching, I would never have been as personally developed as I am, never been as confident as I am. I would never have gone after my own dreams as much as I am with doing this project, and I certainly wouldn't be reaching 4,000 people after 9 months.
That's, I think, one of the wonderful things about coaching as a profession overall is that even if you don't make $1 million in it, It helps you to embrace the lifestyle that ensures ongoing personal growth and fulfillment. And if you're going to take responsibility for catalyzing other people's growth and fulfillment, then you're going to be ongoingly exposed to that material and see what works and what doesn't work and where people get stuck. And it just becomes so much more possible to reach your own level of fulfillment and satisfaction. So I think that the last 10 or 15 minutes of what you're describing is really a culmination of the benefits of being in life coaching.
It empowers you to be able to walk your talk. If you are able to walk your talk, you have more respect from your clients and your colleagues and yourself. So I have had a coach or multiple coaches now for the past 4 or 5 years, and I will have a coach or multiple coaches until the day I die. And I think it's really important for people who are in coach training, thinking about becoming a coach, or who have had their training and practicing as coaches. I think it's really important that we all hire coaches ourselves. And I mentor a lot of coaches. I have a lot of coaches, clients, and have had. Because of my business background, it's just a natural fit to help them build their practices. What I always tell them is not only hire a coach, hire an expensive coach. Even if it's not for a long time, do it for a while, because what's going to happen is you will get results, not just by the virtue of the fact that they're expensive, but chances are they're usually better if they're expensive than if they're not. And what's going to happen is you're going to get results, and you go, this is worth it. And if it's worth it for you to pay,
there you go,
$375 a month, $475 a month, I've even paid as much as $750 a month. In fact, I've paid $1,000 a month. If you get results paying that much, it just empowers you to charge more yourself and have the confidence that you're worth it.
I couldn't agree more. And I too have had coaches and mentors my entire life, and I will have them until I die. Because, as one of my favorite mentors told me, you can't pick yourself up by your own collar. You just don't have the leverage to do it yourself. And the money that's come back to me from working with coaches, the expertise that I've developed from being coachable, making myself coachable, is just invaluable. So let me get back a little bit more to the practicalities, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
What would you say, in your experience with coaches that you've mentored and in your own experience, what do you think the 2 or 3 most common mistakes that people make in the beginning are?
Not believing in themselves would be a big one. Thinking that it's going to be easy and that clients are just going to come to them, I think, might be another one.
By the way, the system that I'm teaching people is well designed to get people to walk through the door. But that doesn't invalidate what you're saying, because once they're in the door, your marketing is how good a coach you are, and people that think that that will be easy or that's as simple as talking to a friend are, they're in for a bit of a surprise. But the people that are willing to really commit and have a passion for growing themselves and can embrace the process rather than the moment-to-moment success are going to be much more successful in the long run.
Well, I think that what happens a lot is that people develop good coaching skills and they bring to the table a good, rich life experience. And I think what you're creating is going to be very valuable to them, because I think one of the big mistakes is people don't realize it is a business. And if they haven't been in business before, fortunately I've been in business for 12 years before. I think by having your own business, you recognize that it's a process. In my mind, I like to think that it takes about 3 years to build a business from scratch. And you might say, well, that's a limiting thought and doesn't have to take that long. And however, you're setting up all kinds of systems. There's so much to be done besides the coaching itself. And you're building up a reputation, a referral network. And I think a lot of times people think it's just going to happen overnight. And so I think a mistake is to think that you haven't built a huge business in 1 year, that you're a failure. That's my own personal belief of a mistake people make.
Interesting. Susan Austin said the same thing. For those people that are very eager to get started as fast as they can get started, are there a couple of things you'd recommend that they do?
Well, I think investing in programs like what you're developing, I think just ongoing education and self-development is crucial. I think that reading a book like The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber is good. A lot of people, they talk about that. I can't remember the name of the author, the guy who's from Hawaii who does the financial stuff. Yes,
Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
People like that, if you haven't thought that way before yourself, that you're just beginning, that can be a mind opener,
It sounds like what you're saying is that when people first get involved with life coaching, they get very involved with the doing of life coaching, but not as much with the business aspects of life coaching. And they need a rudimentary grounding in how to work on a business as opposed to in a business, and the importance of cash flow and the way that people who build wealth think of those things.
I think so. I really believe in just all forms of education. Benjamin Franklin said, I can't remember the exact phrase now. The idea is whatever money you put into your education, it's going to fill your purse overflowing. I can't remember the exact words of how he says it. He has some clever way in 18th century language.
Which is extremely true in this industry in particular. It's true in any business, but in this industry in particular because you are your product. And because so many of the people that come to you, regardless of what life problem they come to you to solve, will need help in balancing out their life with business in some way. So,
well, that's true too, yeah.
Yes. So having an understanding and a grounding in business principles is very important.
What I would say is, what happens is people, they'll start out and they'll think, okay, I got to do some advertising. What I would say is, don't spend a penny on advertising. Put that money into training yourself on marketing.
Right. Right.
You'd be so far ahead.
Totally agreed. And the people listening to this will be of that mind. When you do coaching, do you have any particular assignments that you like to give people?
No, I don't. What we do is we enter into the moment with the person and create from that space. No, I do not have any kind of preformed types of assignments I like to give.
Got it.
When I do give something, it's always negotiated. It's like, well, this is coming to me from my intuition, from what we discussed. I might like to play with this idea for the next week and take it as an inquiry and think about it. What I do is I do a 2-hour design section where they get to design me as the coach and explain what an inquiry is and what homework is, and that at the end of a session they'll get an inquiry or piece of homework, and they get to say, yes, I'll do that, no, I won't do that, or they get to negotiate and say, I won't do that, but I'll do this. Or so they can say, I don't want any homework or inquiry this week, but usually they do. And so what I'll do is throw out an idea, and they usually modify it. Or they say, no, that's perfect, I'll do that. And sometimes that suggestion for a homework or an inquiry comes after the first 10 minutes of the call, and at the end of the call we say, well, is that all we're going to do, or are we going to do some more? And sometimes at the end they get an inquiry and 2 pieces of homework. It's never a formula. And it always comes out of whatever they brought to the table and the safe and courageous space that we create for them to think new thoughts they've never thought before.
Sonny, could you give me an example of an inquiry and a homework assignment?
Sure. An inquiry might be, maybe we did some perspective work. I might ask you, would you like to try living in that perspective this week, since it's usually a newly discovered perspective? And
so that would go back to the example that you gave about your mother being out of work, and one perspective is that she can't get a job because she's too old, and another perspective is that she's an accomplished typist or something like that.
Or she brings a wealth of information, a wealth of life experience, or whatever she discovered and heard that other perspective. And I might just say, well, would you like to live in that perspective this week? Would you like to try it out for size?
Got it.
And that's kind of a combination of an inquiry and homework. It's kind of like that's almost like a hybrid. Straight inquiry might be, what does it mean to be courageous? And ask yourself that when you're brushing your teeth. Ask yourself that, what's it mean to be courageous this morning when I'm waking up? What do I think of it now? And what do I think of it while I'm driving to work? And tape that question on your mirror, on your computer, and ask yourself, what is courage to me all week long? That's an inquiry. It's kind of taking an idea and looking at it from different perspectives, from different life places throughout the week to come up with multiple answers for yourself of what you feel that concept is. So it's usually about an idea or a perspective or a notion and kind of exploring it, play with it and come up with your own interpretation of it. Homework is much more like asking someone, they might involve journaling on their experience of something, or it might be to make a journal entry every night based on what good things did they do that day, what were their successes for the day. It's usually an action. It could be done once a week or just done between.
They could write down 3 courageous actions that they took that day.
Sure.
Okay. I got it.
That kind of homework can be emailed. And when I ask for those kind of actions, what we recommended is that you can ask not only in the most fundamental way, and I don't always do this, but especially if I'm coaching someone just one time and I'm going to do a follow-up, I'll ask them, what do they want to do, and when will they do it, and how will I know they did it? How will they let me know? Do they want to email me? Do they want to call me? Do they want to talk about it?
So you really let them design it and take responsibility for it.
Yeah, and yet it's not just, oh, yeah, I'll do that, but it's, okay, when, and how will I know?
That's a fairly clear distinction between coaching and psychotherapy. It's pretty rare that a psychotherapist would hold their patient as accountable for an assignment like that a coach would. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I had gotten some psychotherapy in the early 80s when I had my self-image problems. I don't remember any assignments like that I was held accountable for, no.
Okay.
There's always exploration of past experiences. Coaching isn't about the past. We never ask for the story or the history. We ask, where are you now? What's going on now? What do you think?
Where do you want to get, and how can I help you get there?
Yeah, what might be, yeah, exactly. You go from where are you now and where do you want to go?
Sandy, would you stop people from looking at the past if it appeared that it could help them get where they wanted to go?
No, not at all. There are times when people want to tell a history or a story. In the design session, I do let them know about some of the coaching tools. One of them is intruding, that they are granting me permission to intrude. If they are doing a lot of storytelling that is not, that I don't feel is productive, that I have the right to intrude for the sake of their learning and their moving forward. If I feel like their storytelling is just going in circles, or it's a delay, or it's about other people and it's not about them, if the storytelling is about them and their inner life and their values, it can be quite revealing. If it's a storytelling about someone else and it's just going on and on, I got better things to do.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
for the sake of them, it's time to stop and let's ask a powerful question that's going to do some good for them, you know.
Very important.
And they agree to that when we first start out.
Sure. And one of the motivations that people will have for coming to see a coach is to help them change their thinking. And I think we have to remember that the experience that we have in being with them, we're only with them for that 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever it is each week or each month, but they're with them all the time. And so if we're experiencing that type of a boredom or lack of connectedness to their soul, so to speak, then it's likely that they are too, and that leads to an emptiness and isolation and lack of ability to connect with their creative brilliance. And so they really need someone to intrude upon them.
It's done in a way that they know we have their best interest at heart. It's not a judgment against them to stop them. It's not judging that they're wrong to be telling me this. It's that, hey, great, and what about this?
Yeah. I also think the other brief conversation we should have about that is about induced feelings. And this is something that comes from the psychotherapy world, from the psychology world. The notion that feelings that people don't want to have, they will find a way to get you to have while they're talking to you. So if that person who is skirting around an important issue, by telling stories, leaves you feeling anxious, that perhaps they don't want to feel anxious about what they mentioned earlier on in the coaching session. And so that's why they're skirting around things, and you need to help them to face that anxiety and move forward. The complication is that there's not a meter that you hang on the wall that can tell you whether this feeling is coming from them or it's coming from you. I think that every coach should be journaling to themselves every night about their associations and thoughts and feelings about what went on in the sessions, what went on in their lives, because it's only by really overdeveloping that self-reflective muscle that we're able to tell what came from the client and what came from us. There's a much more extensive discussion that we get into if this was a talk about psychotherapy.
Well, it is related to one of the principles of coaching, I believe, is that if you are experiencing something that you think you're bringing almost as baggage to the session, they're starting to talk about something and something's going through your head distracting you from really being over there with them, that it's kind of coaching ethics that you confess that you put it on the table, that you say, you know, as you're talking, I want you to know that I've got this bias. I think your partner's a creep or whatever, and you confess it. That's not a good example. You would.
I think at minimum you have to confess it to yourself so that you know that that's operating.
And it does serve the client to let the client know, because otherwise, it's almost like what the coach's responsibility during the session is to remain clear, to be free of your own stuff, and to be listening over there and to be listening to what's in the air and what's between the lines. And if you're thinking anything about I as you're listening, it's a disservice to the client. And so if I'm listening to a client and I start getting an I sentence, something about me, if I can't refocus, then it's time to confess it so that I can get it out so I can focus. They appreciate that. It's kind of like being honest about being distracted, because otherwise my job really is to be focused on them, not on me.
Sure, and it's often very relieving to focus on another person. It's a very relieving experience to come outside of yourself and refocus on the other person anyway.
Well, it's one of the great services that you can perform as a coach.
Yeah.
Because they don't get that from their friends or family. Their friends and family always have an inner agenda that they're going to put on them. And as a coach, we get detached from having an agenda. And if we have an agenda for them, that's what we want to confess, because that's not part of the deal. We want to support their agenda.
Sonny, have there been times in your coaching career that you've lost the faith, so to speak?
There have been clients that have shaken me. I think I told you about the situation where a client, he was a consultant, and he wanted me to help us build his consulting practice. And he came to the call one day and told me he thought he was going to be killing himself by the end of the day. That definitely disturbed me for a few months.
How did you handle that?
I just pretty much said, you know, I'm not trained for this, which is what I was trained to say. And I bailed out of the conversation and said, I want you to get some professional help from a therapy professional, a counselor. He is really mad at me, and I don't know that he's ever forgiven me. He felt like I abandoned him. I feel as though if I were more experienced, that I would have handled it better, and I think that there was some truth in his accusations of me abandoning him, and I do it the best I could, and I think that's part of what shook me, is it was the best I could, and it didn't feel like it was good enough.
Yeah. Sonny, you know, what you could say in the future is that you're legally required to refer him to a trained professional, but that you would like to talk through and really understand why he wants to kill himself, so that you accomplish both things.
Mm-hmm. I think so, too.
And then you make sure he sees a professional.
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking as a psychologist now more than as a coach, because at that moment, first of all, if someone actually comes into the room and talks to you about it, that means they're more interested in talking about it and hopefully having you talk them out of it than in actually doing it. Not that there aren't people who come in and talk about it and then do it, but it's less likely if they're actually coming in to talk about it, they want to be talked out of it. And the other thing is that it's important not to exacerbate their sense of it being urgent, so that they need to understand that this is something they can talk about, but that you're legally required to refer them to someone else for this level of difficulty, because you don't want to lead them to believe that you can fix it. Yet as a human being, you can think about what you might do as a...
I could say our coaching call is over. Now I'm here as your friend.
Yeah, because if your friend said that they wanted to kill themselves, you would first ask them, you know, why and what's going on. Then you would just compassionately figure out how to get them some professional help. And that's basically what you need to do.
He accused me of covering my rear end, which there's some truth to that. And it also just scared me, and I wasn't really prepared for it. Now that it's happened, every time I enter into an agreement with a new coach in that design session, mostly we talk about what they want, what the client wants, how they want to design me as a coach, and we cover, you know, some of the coaching terms and methods and things. But I also now always say that one thing I'm definitely not prepared to deal with is suicide, and if you do bring it up seriously, and not to say, I let clients say, well, you know, sometimes I think about suicide. That's, you know, they just talk about it that way. That's fine. But if you say, I might commit suicide today, I want you to know that the session will be over, and I'm not prepared to help you with that. And I feel it's good to cover that right up front, which I did not do with him because I never anticipated it. But I've had a good reception with people, and I haven't had a problem since.
It's a very viable strategy.
So that's, as far as things that have shaken me or helped me lose the faith, that's it. I think when I've taken on clients who are more troubled, I have taken on clients who are in therapy, and what I find is even though I'm treating them as creative, magnificent, and whole, and resourceful, that if they are in treatment, that naturally sometimes they're going to go to these dark places or troubled places, and I'm willing to go with them, and I hold them in a space of being healthy. However, it can be trying. That can be challenging, and it can wear me down. So typically, I have become more picky about my clients because I'm not a coach for everybody. And I tend to like people, not people who aren't troubled, but people who are not deeply troubled.
And you can't always tell.
No, you can't.
You can't always tell up front, and that's why it's so important to have a trial period, not commit to having an ongoing relationship until you really know that you're going to be able to work with the person and get them results. And also that you like working with them.
And they like working with me, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's mutual. I think it's important that there be a fit both ways. And here's where business experience comes in. A lot of times people who are new to business think that everyone is a prospect and everyone's a customer, and the customer is always right and you have to serve everyone. Well, I was in business probably for about 3 years in my sound and video business before I figured out that, hey, I don't want that person as a customer. They're too much trouble, and I recognize I don't want that person as a customer. It's a lot easier to see which other ones I don't want. And they always have the assumption that I want everybody. And once you're in business for a while, it becomes clear you do not want to serve everybody. And it's a real advantage to know that.
And to be able to market yourself so you have enough flow of people coming through the door that you can really choose. I have the opinion that one bad client can ruin your practice.
Really?
I have that opinion because look at what happens when people have a really difficult client that they don't know how to work with. They look at their schedule for the week, and let's say Harry's coming in Thursday afternoon. I never had a client named Harry, so that's why I'm using that word. Let's say Harry's coming in Thursday afternoon, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I got to see Harry on Thursday. And people are dreading it all week long, and if they're not able to work effectively with that person, then they know they're not getting the results. They feel a schism in their integrity and their self-confidence as a coach or psychotherapist, and it's unnecessary. You don't have to do that. I think that if you learn enough about marketing and you teach yourself to be a very effective coach and you go through trial periods with people and are very careful about who you commit to for longer-term periods. By that I mean that I might initially agree to have 1 or 2 sessions with people and see how that goes, and then ask them if they'd like to commit to a trial of 3 months. And if we're both agreed after the end of those 3 months that everything is going well, that we would continue to work together. But that way they're not shocked if you need to discharge them.
That's good. It is. It's a matter of managing your own energy, and there can be significant drains. If you can recognize what that source of drain is and eliminate it, then you're actually doing more of a service to all the clients you are serving.
Yeah.
Because you're more present. And you're happier. And after all, part of the reason for doing that trial period is to see if I like it, to see if this is really for me.
And it takes away some of the reluctance that the clients have about the commitment to start with, because they're not sure if they can afford the time or the money, or whether they want to reveal themselves ongoingly, or whether they're going to feel controlled, or whether
they have the freedom to bow out too.
They've got the freedom to bow out also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
This has been just wonderful. I've got 2 or 3 more questions, then I think we'll wind down, unless there's something that you think I forgot to ask you. One thing I wanted to ask you was if you had any particular advice with regards to time management and how to set up the hours the way that you wanted to, and what that was like for you.
Sure. Personally, I like to set my week up so that I only work Monday through Thursday. My advice would be for anybody who's going to be doing this is be selfish and pick the time that you want to work, and say that when you're getting a new client, you just say that these are the times I have available. First, you would be exploring whether you want to work together, and if it turns out, and all that's really the most important. And once you find out that you do want to work with someone, then you check out the schedule. But I think it's important to be selfish and to build a schedule around what you want. Don't make yourself available on Sunday evening for this person and Saturday morning for this person and bend over backwards for everyone. It might be tempting to do that at first, but in the long run, you're going to be happier if you structure it around your life. So I like to work Monday through Thursday, and in fact, what happened is my practice When I first built it up, I had 17 clients in 9 different time zones, and I built that up in the first 3 months. I ended up finding out that I didn't like coaching that many clients and that I wanted some project days. So generally what I would do is make it be that Mondays and Thursdays are my coaching days and that I only want to have 8 clients, and that I use Tuesdays and Wednesdays for project days or for working on the business rather than in the business, according to the E-Myth. I think it's important to structure. I like to do it in blocks. I like now to coach for 45 minutes. I like to keep people to the time so that I have 15 minutes to recover between calls. So I think it's okay to be selfish. I think it's okay to make it work according to your schedule.
And not only that, the more that people experience you as having a limited number of hours available, the more valuable they will tend to value your time, which will translate to both the willingness to pay higher fees and the interest and belief in the work that you do with them. So you wind up doing more effective work for better compensation and a better personal life for the coach. I think those are wonderful tips you provided.
Regarding that, as far as appointments go, too, another thing that really did bother me in the beginning was especially when I was coaching the people for free before I started taking the training. At that time, I wasn't doing those 2-hour design sessions, and people would stand me up. They wouldn't call, and so I'd call them, and they go, "Oh, I'm painting right now," you know. I'm going, "Wait a minute, we had an appointment. My life's important," you know, and I just felt like I was being belittled by the fact they wouldn't hold to the appointment. It was free. But even when people pay, what I found is that I'm doing this coaching to give back to the world. And I live a life of freedom over here. I don't have to work for a living. And so regardless of whether I'm getting paid or not, if someone stands me up for an appointment and they don't bother to email me or call me and let me know that the time's not going to work out and I'm waiting for the call, that probably has been my biggest pet peeve. And it's not a problem anymore. How I took care of it was I started requiring the 2-hour design session. I used to think that really didn't benefit the client so much, and it was a waste of their money, and so we didn't really need it. But what I found is that the 2-hour design session, while it's mostly about them and what they want and exploring things like that, there are 3 things I cover. One is the suicide issue we covered. The other one is I let them know that we don't have privilege the way a psychotherapist or an attorney does, so that if they are going to be committing a capital offense or whatever, they might as well just keep it to themselves.
Funny, by the way, psychologists and attorneys are required to divulge by law. If a patient were to come in to me as a doctor and tell me that I killed my mother last night, my response to them would be that I recommend that you go to the police. I wouldn't be allowed to call the police if they killed them last night. By the way, I'm not an attorney, so you can check this with an attorney if you're listening, and please don't take this as strict legal advice. But this is my understanding of the law to date. The situation changes, though, if a patient comes in and says, I plan to kill my mother tomorrow night. If they plan to kill their mother tomorrow night, I have to both call the police and their mother to warn them. It's a myth to think that the confidentiality clauses protect people who plan to commit a crime.
Okay.
Just so you know.
That's good, and I think it's good for your listeners to know. So what I do cover with them that we're not protected by any privilege, and that even past that, we'd have to testify in court too. And then the other thing that I do is totally selfish, is I let them know that I'm doing this, and the thing I prize above all is my time and my freedom. And my biggest pet peeve is being stood up. And so if they are not going to make a call, I want them to make every effort to either email me or call me, and it's fine. I realize life gets in the way, and I realize sometimes they might forget, and it could be that I get stood up, and that's fine if it's occasional. But if it's habitual, it's just not going to work. And I let them know that right at the beginning. And by spelling it out, it takes about a minute, they come back and say, oh, I'm very responsible, I respect time. And by letting them vocalize that, they tend to adhere to that agreement better. And the other thing that I've done and brought in that I think could be helpful to anybody here who is considering this as an occupation, because this can be a problem, what I do is I have 2 phone lines. And if they haven't called by 5 minutes after their appointed time, I leave the line open that they're calling me on, and I use my other line to call them. And sometimes I reach them, and they have forgotten or whatever, and I just say, call me back on my time here, call me on their coaching line. Sometimes I get their answering machine, and I leave a message, and then I immediately email them, and I just say, I'm here till 1:45 or whatever, and I'm waiting for your call. And by doing that, it just made it be that it takes away me sitting here waiting for a call and my own self-esteem going down, down, down. So that's one little tip.
Yeah. Do you charge the people for that time?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I didn't call them back and let them know that I'm here waiting, and if I didn't cover it in that 2-hour design session, the fact that I'm getting paid and it's getting stood up doesn't make it any less to me. The money doesn't matter. I mean, I want to be paid, but it still would be a real bother to have them not respect the appointment time.
I think that's really valuable, the way that you set that up. It's a really valuable tip.
It's helped to the idea that I let them know that I'm going to be calling them after 5 minutes. It's empowering to them, too, because it's okay to be human. It's okay if they mess up. It's just a way for me to take some action and be proactive instead of sitting there passively. In the very beginning days, I didn't have much confidence in my coaching, and first I'm all hyped up, and after 2 minutes, it's kind of going, okay, well, what's going on? After 5 minutes, my self-esteem is going down more. By the time 10 minutes is gone, it's like, oh, maybe I'm not a good coach.
I think that what most people don't realize is that the more effective you are, in some ways, they're going to be going to areas that are scary to them, that they haven't been able to accomplish before, that are a little bit uncomfortable for them to look at. And in some ways, the better that you do, the more that the client is going to want to flee the field. And of course, you want to work with them in such a way that they're maximally comfortable and motivated, but to a certain extent, it's inevitable that the client will have negative feelings as well as positive feelings about the coaching and about you personally, but that doesn't necessarily reflect badly upon you personally or about the coaching.
Well, that's another thing that I actually learned from the coach training, and it's just a basic principle that I never really realized before, is that almost everything in life, when someone's reacting or someone's out there doing something, and we have a tendency to think it's about us, and what I've learned is it's not about me. It's about them. It's not a reflection on me or my coaching abilities that they didn't call in. There's something going on in their life, and it's really about them.
Right, we're not quite that important, right?
Yeah, before I took this training, before I became a coach, I used to think it was about me. And even when I was in the early days of coaching, as I'm telling you, my esteem was going down. I've come over time the last few years to recognize this.
When I would have a client who didn't show up, I didn't have the design session that you talked about. I would instead make the assumption that the client was going to respect my time and respect their time and respect the relationship. I wait until they miss the session, which everybody eventually misses something for some reason or another. I think I once had a doctor who never missed a session. But other than that, eventually something goes wrong. Usually I won't charge them for that first time, and then when they came in the next time, I'll let them know that I was not going to charge them for the one that they missed. That generally speaking, if they gave me 48 hours notice, that I wouldn't charge them for the session. After that, if they would miss a session, I would spend the time writing about that client or that patient, because I figured I was getting paid and there was something going on with them. And I would think very carefully about what happened in the last appointment, what I knew was happening in their life. I always keep a clear chart that has the major goals that the client is trying to accomplish and the major obstacles that are impeding them. I try to think about how this particular absence might reflect the type of obstacles that get in the way of their goals. And then when they come back, I try to listen for an opportunity to talk to them about that. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I do that directly, and sometimes I let them talk about it themselves.
That's really good. I do this similar thing in that I have my notes from all their previous sessions, and I spend the time reflecting on them and reading through, and it gives me a chance to look back to what happened a year ago or 6 months ago. However, I haven't done that extra stuff you're talking about of looking at what this current behavior, how it relates to all that, and looking for an opportunity to talk about it. That's a great step to add.
There's two ways to go about it. I think that the way that you described in the design session, it'll cut off the behavior at the pass, and so it'll facilitate the coaching relationship. It will make it less painful for the coach to go through working with that client. The flip side of that, though, is that you miss out on some of the information that you could get about when the person actually does miss the session, what that might represent in their lives in terms of the goals that they're trying to accomplish. If your coaching has anything to do with relationships, and this turns out to be any type of a pattern, you can bet that you're not the only one that they do this with.
You bet, yeah.
The opportunity to gently and lovingly work that through can be one of the most empowering things that you give to them.
Mm-hmm. Really an eye-opener to see the variation among people. There are some people who are compulsive almost about missing, and there are some people who are compulsive about being there. And it's a wide variation. I actually have coached people who were close friends. One referred the other to me, and both became clients. And one was compulsively always there and always so committed, and the other one was so obviously absent. Wow, I wonder what their friendship's like.
Funny, I once had a client who called who said that they wanted to come see me, but their problem was they could never keep an appointment that they made. I'm serious.
That's a problem.
What I should have done is say, well, let's just have the appointment right now on the phone. I actually tried to make appointments with her, and she absolutely didn't keep them. She was right. I wasn't able to help her at that time.
But they usually come to coaching for something, some action. They want to develop a sense of focus, or they want to develop persistence, or they want to spend more time with their family, or they want to get a better job, or they want, they have something they want to do. We call that the small A agenda. That's the immediate. And what we do in that design session is really listen for and try and discover what is their big A agenda, what's the subtext, what is their bigger purpose, what is all this for? If all these things that they're coming to the coaching for were solved, and they had all the money in the world and security, and they were, now what would they be up to? Well, with the In the Bones session, what you're doing is you're committing to that big A agenda, which maybe they haven't even admitted to themselves or what they're up to, or maybe they don't. You're helping them discover. And through all the coaching on all the immediate problem-solving sessions you're doing in the beginning, you also hold the place for them that they're on this way to this big A agenda. That's their big mission in life. And you hold that for them so that when they forget it, you help keep them on course.
Sure.
And within the Bones, it's about being able to stand for that for them to such a degree that you're willing to have them fire you, because you're willing to challenge them enough that you're risking them not liking what you're saying or asking, but you're doing it for the sake of them, for the sake of their magnificence.
It's either going to kill them or cure them, right?
Yep, and you have to be, and the idea is you're willing to get fired. You're willing to say what needs to be said or ask what needs to be asked in such a way that...
I love that. Penny, this is really inspiring.
Good.
I really enjoyed this talk, and I'm sure that my listeners will be very happy to have this available to them.
Good.
And I'm wondering if people might like to get in touch with you, in addition to getting your free emails and affirmations at sunnythoughts.com. Is there somewhere they can call you if they wanted some advice about coaching or anything else that you have to offer?
I think email's better. Sunny at sunnythoughts.com. So that's SUNNY at SUNNYthoughts.com.
That's easy enough. That's terrific. Thanks very much for your time and attention. If you'd like to find out more about taking your coaching to the next level, getting certified, and building the practice of your dreams, please visit becomearealcoach.com. 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 Thank you.